Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. We have with us here today Assistant Secretary General and Executive Director of CTED, Madame Michèle Coninsx, and CTED stands for the Counter-Terrorism Executive Directorate.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining me. I have shared this morning the first session of the first high-level conference of heads of counterterrorism, and that was devoted to the challenges and opportunities of cooperation, information sharing, having the right expertise, and having the right capacities. First in its kind, it was really that session bringing together all players of a large number of countries, and the debate discussions just started, so I don't have any outcome, but I can tell you what we have been sharing with each other. Terrorism today is definitely transnational. And that means that it's evolving and taking different shapes overnight. That means that we have to follow the same pace when we are sharing information, when we're building up capacity and expertise, and when we're ensuring proper international cooperation. That means that international cooperation has been pronounced this morning by the Secretary General as one of the top priorities in his agenda. International cooperation means, in the first place, that you have to gather different players from different states, different regions, that you have to cooperate across the regions, and that you do it mainly on the basis of trust. So the key word is really trust. And it starts with a sharing of information. What kind of information are we talking about? Well, it's going from intelligence to biometric data, to PNR, to API, advanced passenger information, financial data. And those data have to be sent to the right person at the right time and the right language, because if those data are not communicated in the right way to the right authorities, or not in time, or not at all, the consequences are really devastating. So it is about having this exchange of information and having the right pace, the right speed of information based on trust. But even if you look at governments and if you look at authorities, you see that not all the authorities have the same strengths, have a diversity of expertises, and might have some struggling with capacity and with expertise and know-how. So that's also a way where we looked into and saw that we certainly can help throughout stepped-up cooperation, help supported by the United Nations, the different states in need. And then we went to the different forms of cooperation. We looked at the United Nations, and one big call of Secretary General is to have a reform of the CTED architecture. And hence the Secretary General established the Office on Counter-Terrorism, and Office of Counter-Terrorism is in charge of the full coordination of all UN entities. Now, the CTED, the organization I'm heading, and since I'm arriving, or since I arrived in November, have made ourselves a promise to work hand in hand and to ensure that, according to our mandates, CTED is concentrating on assessment, analyses, and expertise in CT. We do evaluation assessments, visits in the 193 member states. The reports, recommendations adopted in Security Council serve as the basis for the programming of technical assistance and of capacity building. Well, we agreed that those recommendations, those reports serve really as basis for the programming of technical assistance and capacity building, and are taken over by OCT, ensuring the coordination between 38 entities and ensuring that we don't lose time with focusing on the wrong recommendations, on the wrong needs and gaps that have been identified. So that's one form of cooperation. Again, it's based on trust between the two organizations, and we are working on it in a very forceful way. One of the reports we have been submitting to the Security Council recently is a joint report showing the cooperation between the two organizations. And if you have been following the news, very recently both OCT, the SRSG of Iraq and myself briefed the Security Council on a common mission we had in Iraq, where we really followed the approach by the books. We went in 2015 to Iraq as CTED, made an evaluation on the CT measures. In 2018 March, Mr. Vronkov and myself went to Iraq. We secured 5 of the recommendations, discussed them with the highest level of the authorities, and went back to Iraq under the leadership of OCT. A mission went in May to Iraq. Participation of one of my experts from CTED in that delegation, and together we are now following up on the real needs, the 5 needs identified, to see how we can really support that member state. So very focused, targeted support to a member state highly concerned by terrorism. That is one example, but we have other examples. For instance, in the region where UNODC in the Judicial Sahel platform has enabled judges and prosecutors in helping to communicate and share their information. And also across the regions we have examples of CTED together with UNODC having the Euromed Justice program, allowing the cooperation between the Mediterranean and the Euro-Mediterranean levels. So you see that UN, regional, cross-regional, a lot of good steps have been taken. One point is still very important in the bilateral cooperation. I'm talking about the law enforcement and the judicial cooperation. We are faced with an enormous complexity of terrorism. Think about the relocating and returning foreign terrorist fighters. It is extremely important that we go for accountability for terrorist offences, that we do not accept impunity for terrorism, but going for the criminal justice and for convictions means that we also, according and in total respect with human rights and the fair trial and the rule of law, have to go for the right, correct evidence, retrieved, collected, preserved and shared with the right authorities. These are projects we're working on at CTED with other partners, how to make use of material retrieved in the zones of conflict and turn it into tangible, correct evidence. What about the easy access to digital evidence is another part of reality, because without evidence and without proper sharing of that evidence, we will not go very far. And then the last point I wanted to highlight, you have the cooperation between member states, but also very much needed cooperation between member states and non-traditional actors, the private sector, equally important. And what we talk about is public-private partnership. I would like to add 1P, productive public-private partnership, and there we see that CTED involved in assessment, analyses of trends and good practices has now also been engaged with different private sectors. Examples you certainly know from our products is Attack Against Terrorism, where approximately 1 year ago we were liaising with the international forum, Internet Forum to Counter-Terrorism with the 4 big players. That's one example. We also try now via that forum to help out the smaller and the start-up companies to follow the path, the way forward shown to them by the big players in that global internet forum. We are reaching out to the global research network and work with them in order to really have a good compilation of the latest trends, good practices, developments and threats in counterterrorism. Another good example. And finally, when we go on our missions to the member states, we do work with all layers of society. We meet with civil society organizations in order to see how they are programming the countering of violent extremism. Just to give you a few examples. So We are not there yet. A lot has been put in place. United Nations is here really playing its role, and much more to come. Thank you very much for your attention.
Can I ask you a question? What do you make of the criticism by the U.S. mission that at least in the first day, civil society, NGOs, academics were excluded? They said that they reduced their funding, pulled back their... I've seen some other missions say similar things, so I just wanted to give you an opportunity. Why was it done that way, and what do you disagree with in the critique that they issued?
Well, I'm not here to disagree or to agree. I think that Secretary General already responded to that request. They are invited tomorrow, and that's where I want to limit my comment. I don't have any comment to give. I'm one of the invitees as well.
Right, but my question is, I heard the spokesman for Secretary General say NGOs are everywhere, but it seems like it's very much in the second day. Like, you acknowledge at least that this first day, the first day of this conference is member states only.
I can only repeat myself. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, this is Majid Ghali from Iraqi Media, Rudao Media Network. Obviously, this is a very important topic for Iraq and for the Middle East. I wanted to ask you in general about the conference and the strategy, counterterrorism strategy. How will practically implement the member states' policy in countering terrorism? Will there be any impact or any obligations on member states, especially the ones that are dealing with the problem of ISIS and other terrorist groups? Thanks.
Well, we have a lot of references to make. You have the Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy, you have General Assembly resolutions, you have the Security Council resolutions, you have a set of international conventions. What we do, and I only can talk about what we do, CTED, is we monitor, we promote, we facilitate the implementation of all the Security Council resolutions. And since 2001, since Security Council Resolution 1373, we have been confronted with an avalanche of Security Council resolutions. We go through those Security Council resolutions during our assessments, visits, and we do all the visits, and we have done already 141 visits in more than 100 countries with the same methodology in a very objective and neutral way. We bring along all kinds of experts from CTED, liaise with Interpol, with ICAO, to really bring on board the right expertise. And at the end, we have a report which is being discussed with the member state and which needs a follow-up. If we make recommendations, very often half of those recommendations are the sole responsibility of the member state, and half of the recommendations are in need of technical assistance and of capacity building. And that's reality. And I've shown through the example of Iraq that we're taking this very serious, that this country, and I've seen it with my own eyes, is in need, that children need to be taken care of, and this is exactly what we're doing in a very practical and straightforward way.
That concludes the press briefing. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
I had another teaser. In fact, we were very proud because we were talking about products and how we work together with the private sector. Well, today we launched this product, which will be on our website very soon, and that's companion on good practices in the protection of critical infrastructure. It is a document which was done in collaboration with OCT and with Interpol and with support from Japan. It is the sort of help we provide to the member states because protecting of critical infrastructure is not an easy task, but through Resolution 2341, all the member states, all supposed, are obliged to protect their critical infrastructure. And today we will launch, tomorrow we'll launch another compendium on good practices on biometrics. You know, and we talk about these data. I refer to it: information, biometrics, or DNA, fingerprints, or facial recognition, or iris recognition. And again, this is an obligation for all the member states. This is not an easy task for the member states. We are there to help them. This compendium will help them through that exercise. This has been done, again, in close cooperation with OCT, with the support of Australia, and with the Institute of Biometrics. All of this will be available on the website. I invite you to look into the work, very practical work, because we're talking about good practices. Thank you.